So for me, number one is processes. When a crisis hits, some of the aspects of an organization that were set in stone can get unlocked and moving because you can use the pressure, the urgency to do this. So one thing I'm seeing at the many organizations that I advise is more participated decision making, flatter structures, a bit more distributed control than before. And also what this is doing is allowing talent at different places that were buried in the organization, kind of previously hidden under the hierarchy, much more of a chance to thrive. And of course, a recognition that the future of work is wherever you are. Now, I am aware that there are still jobs that cannot be done remotely, and I'm talking more of those roles that could have always had a very strong remote working element, but were held back by rigid thinking and organizations seeing this as radical and a precursor of doom for productivity. But it's great that we can now see some of these things unwrapping. There's a study by McKinsey as well that found major decisions are now reached in 5 or fewer meetings. And I want you to hazard a guess for what the old number used to be. Is it 8? Is it 10? If we were live right now, I'd have you put your hands up and shout out answers. And I bet someone is saying 12 or 15. It's actually 26. I mean, this is mind blowing, and it shows what you can do if you free up your time to focus on more than just meetings. The second opportunity for me is the crisis has emphasized an issue that isn't normally on your collective radar, the digital divide. So for most of us, the internet feels universal, right? And yet it isn't. As of 2020, the World Economic Forum found that in total, I kid you not, 3.7 billion people still had no internet access. More than 1 billion children across the world have been locked out of virtual classrooms this year. So by bringing these connectivity issues to the fore at a time when we're all depending on it, the pandemic is, I'm seeing, pushing telcos, hardware companies, web initiatives, and others to take this much more seriously. A third opportunity is unlocking the value of digital skills. I'm always flying the flag for it. And actually, I'm very, very pleased to see that And Digital themselves have been championing this and stated this to be an urgent need, asking businesses to rethink old models of talent development and look at creating lasting capabilities and evolve those. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. So kudos to them for that. 37% of workers across Europe do not have even basic digital skills. And estimates indicate that within the next decade, almost 80% of jobs will require this kind of digital literacy. I've just completed an investigation for the Office of the Mayor of London on the future of learning, both for workplace and education. And one thing it threw up was that we are seeing finally a mindset shift from the pandemic towards a receptivity and openness to lifelong learning, both from companies who are investing more in skilling and reskilling and upskilling, and employees themselves, even senior folks who previously thought, I'll just do a course, maybe 2 hours once a year on digital security, and that's it. And we're thinking, no, you've got to do a little bit more than that. The fourth benefit of the pandemic is what I like to call the moral economy. What are the values driving your organization? What do you stand for? And the pandemic, I think, has been forcing a reassessment of these values. We're looking at significant displacement from this crisis. People who, unlike those of you tuned in, sadly may not have the luxury of staying in work. Many of them are frightened, deeply uncertain. And leaders need to think about not just the physical layouts of their offices, but also their wider responsibility to a displaced society, especially in the very communities in which they operate. Now, my focus has often been on the advances coming out of the fourth industrial revolution, or what we call Industry 4.0, which we're halfway through. But I've heavily advocated that digital engineering must be people-centered at its core, or we'll go fast, sure, but will we really be going where we need to? We don't want to look back and think, gosh, what do we do? We're going to see much more of these people-driven advances being unlocked at a much more accelerated speed. Organizations that were thinking of transformation as something to do with 2 years or 3 years are now having to condense it and think about doing it in 6 months. So if any of the software that you use knew the fuller context in which you needed something, or was aware of your state of mind when you were trying to do this activity, were you frustrated, bored, annoyed, excited? Were you incredibly annoyed that you didn't find the information you needed from your banking app? That's the promise of effective computing. It would allow the system to pick up on these things and then factor that in to what information it serves you next and what conversation it has with you. So let me explain with a relatable example. Think about the number of times that you speak to a bot during online shopping, right? Finding a product or service for your business, airline tickets, digital services. By 2022, we'll speak more to bots than our partners. Some of you are probably smiling at that, not a good thing. But what if we could humanize this experience and take it beyond level 1 or 2 of bot behavior? As soon as you go on a website or an app of a huge number of brands, you have this little dialog box that pops up on the bottom right. And of course, you come away really annoyed because the conversation was stilted. It took too long. What if, however, the system was more emotionally aware? In this case, let's say this is a bot, but it doesn't always have to be. And it acknowledged your mood, understood your question, and addressed this in its answer. And all these strands under AI, including this, are also, by the way, a source of great employment. The World Economic Forum predict that we'll see at least, I kid you not, 133 million new roles generated as a result of this new division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms. I want to talk about blended worlds or augmented scenarios. The COVID lockdowns, I think, have really stimulated a diversification in the mediums through which we sell, communicate, provide customer service. And then the dynamics of our social and working environments are twisting and turning. And in that, the very act of how we persuade, communicate, relay information, particularly for companies, is really evolving. So going beyond the pandemic, one thing I wanted to give you an insight on is that I envision more companies starting to think about how to blend the physical and online worlds, considering tools that will actually augment the digital world over or onto our real environments as a very effective mechanism to grow businesses. So currently, I think it's mainly the more progressive companies that are using what we call mixed reality in brand campaigns and customer service funnels and product prototyping even. And I really want to open this up, bring those benefits on the radar of more organizations. Augmented reality is being used to train. It's allowing people to learn how to use equipment in their jobs by holding the tablet or smartphone over the item, triggering an AR experience. And what you see is a manual kind of a pointer showing you the different aspects and items and parts of that object and telling you exactly what to do. I actually fixed my printer 3 weeks ago doing this. Engineers at NASA use this, okay? But so are now my local boiler repairmen. I'm serious. The second is product prototyping. You've got really big brands like Nike and Pepsi actually using this to think about packaging. And you've got automotive companies and retail as well using it to allow their people to create prototypes of products. In education, it's being used as a teaching aid. And in HR, one of my favorite use cases, I'd say, for onboarding, upskilling your workforce, especially with remote working. Neuroscience research shows that your brain absorbs and retains up to 4 times more when using immersive mediums. And that's where augmented commerce comes in. I believe that in the future, e-commerce websites and apps will work more like physical stores. And actual stores will need to actually work more like a website. And by this, I mean to incorporate and offer the portability, the immediacy, and the creativity of a digital experience. And this really isn't a gimmick. AR advertising revenue stood at $1.5 billion in 2019 in the US alone. Adidas, ASOS, Toyota, Pepsi, just a few names out of hundreds that are ramping up efforts to produce more augmented content. And I think we're missing a trick if we don't look at this. There are a few things I'd love for you to take away from this and maybe do more in your organizations. First, think about becoming catalysts. Each of you within your organizations, in your place as a business professional, are taking decisions every day that'll have an impact. Why not use these as windows to catalyze what you wanted to set in motion for some time? Get buy-in for some of those projects, whether it's digital or otherwise. The second is we must think more about enhancing our organizational capacity, but do it in a way that actually pushes our individual human potential. So I'm writing a book at the moment, and the theme of it is how we're going to elevate human potential with some of these advances. And I spoke earlier about the moral economy. There is a responsibility that we have as leaders within our organization, but to our workforce as well, to take them along for the ride and allow them to build their own human potential. And lastly, it would do us a whole lot of good to invest now in more digital skills as a way to boost resiliency. Practical studies show if we invested just 1/5 of our marketing budgets into internal upskilling and reskilling, we actually stand to grow future revenue lines by as much as 30%.